Hello everybody, welcome to my second digital studio demo. Today I'm going to show you how to make a box using slabs, so you can make yourself a cool planter or a box with a lid, whatever you'd like, but the construction will be the same. So you'll need a number of supplies for this project, so in the information below the video I put a list of supplies and then also alternatives that you can use if you don't have the pottery tools at home. Once you have your supplies gathered, you'll want to prep your workspace. We will be rolling out slabs, so it's wise to use something to separate the clay from the table. I recommend newspaper, canvas if you have it, but really any cloth or surface that the clay doesn't really stick a lot to. And before you even start with the clay, the first thing that you'll want to do is cut out a template for your box. So for simplicity's sake, my box is going to be square. So I cut a square out of some paper. The thicker the paper, the better the template will work. Flimsy paper doesn't stand up to the clay as well, but it will work just fine. If you want to make a rectangular box, then you'll have more than one size template, but I'll let you figure that one out. For today, we'll just do a square. And once you have your template, then you'll want to roll out your slab. So I've got a little hunk of clay here. I'll use my wire tool. If you don't have a wire tool, you can use wire or string or dental floss or any kind of thin material that will cut the clay. And then I'll want to kind of squeeze my clay down so that it's easier to roll into a slab. Give it some firm taps. You don't want to tap it so much that it gets thinner than how thin you're going to be rolling it out. And then I've got my two even sticks here. So anything you have lying around your house, if you've got two dowels of wood that are the same, that's ideal. But anything you can find that's the same width to use as a guide for your roller. And then I'll take my rolling pin. So if you have a rolling pin from your kitchen, you can use that. Or a wine bottle or olive oil bottle also works perfectly fine. And then I'll start rolling out my slab gradually. If it starts to get too long or if it's bunching up in one spot, just rotate it. This will also help it so that it doesn't stick to the surface that you're rolling it on. That looks good. And then before we cut the slab into the shape we need for our box, I'll want to smooth out any textures that we have on it, any weird texture from the canvas. So I can use my rib, or if you don't have a rib, you can use an old gift card or an old credit card. And just give your slab a nice smooth on both sides. And then from here, if you followed along with my supply list, you'll notice that I wrote texture tools on the list. And this can be anything that you have around the house. Seashells are really fun. You can use lace, you can use really any sort of round stamp-like object. You can get creative with your first slab if you want to just play around with texture and see what you like. You can always wedge it and roll it up again and then use the one that is your favorite. All right, so I've got a cool texture from my seashell, and then I'll use my template to cut out the square. When you're cutting out the sides of your box, you really want to take care to accurately cut the sides. So line up a ruler with the side of your template and get a nice straight cut. The more care that you take when you're cutting out the sides of your box, the easier it will be when you're constructing it. If you don't have a ruler and you have to freehand it, that's fine, just be extra careful. All right, so I cut out my first side. Take the scraps, bunch them up so they don't dry out. Peel the template away, and then I've got my first side. This will act as the bottom of the box, so you will need at least 4 other sides, and you'll need 5 if you're going to do a box with a lid. So roll out all the slabs that you need, and then also cut all your squares and put your squares off to the side. And then we'll need to wait a little while for them to firm up. So you can just leave your squares on the table for 30 minutes to an hour, or however long it takes them to firm up. Or if you don't have time and you want to finish the next day, what I did with my squares is I cut them all out, took a little bit of plastic and lightly draped it over the squares, left them overnight, and by the next day they were ready to assemble. All right, so some time has passed. We have all of the sides of our box cut out, and we've let them firm up to a stage of clay called leather hard. If you're not familiar with the term leather hard, basically what it means is that your clay is no longer at the moldable stage, but it's at a firmer stage that's similar to the consistency of a firm cheese or a stiff chocolate bar. You'll see these squares that are still with moldable clay are quite floppy, whereas the ones that have been sitting out for a while will hold their shape. This is the ideal stage for trimming, refining your clay, and also assembling your slabs. So take one of the slabs to use as the base, and then we'll have at least 4 sides and 1 extra if you want to do a lid for your box. One thing that you will need for assembling your box is some slip. Slip is just watered down clay that we use as kind of a glue to assemble our pieces. If you don't have any slip, you can make some really easily just by taking little bits of clay, putting them in a small dish, letting those little bits dry. If you have a hair dryer, you can dry them really quickly, and then add a little bit of water and it'll break back down into kind of a mud-like substance. And that is what you can use to assemble your pieces. And you'll also need to use your needle tool or xacto knife or paring knife, anything that you can use to get nice deep cross hatches into your slabs that will help hold them together. So I'm gonna put slabs all around the bottom of my box, so I'll just take some time now to cross hatch all of the sides of the base. And the key with cross hatching is to get pretty deep, and you want those little bits of clay that are sticking up from the sides, because that will help with the bond. All right, so the base of your box should look kind of like that. And we'll put that off to the side. These 4 sides are going to sit on the base like this. However, the sides are going to butt up against each other. So in order for them to fit nicely together, we'll need to bevel the parallel sides of the sides of your box. So not the top or the bottom, but the left and right hand sides will be beveling. So we're basically cutting off the corner at a 45-degree angle, nice and carefully with the X-Acto knife or with any sort of sharp knife. Watch out for your fingers there. And I'm cutting off the corner so that I get this nice slope here. If I was in the studio or had fancy tools, I might use one of these bevelers to make it totally perfect, but I honestly always use an X-Acto knife and it works just fine. All right, so that's gonna be my first side, but I'll do all the beveling on the sides of these before I move forward with construction. Cool. And then we will be attaching all of these sides, so if you want to go ahead and cross hatch the sides with your needle tool as well, you can go ahead and do that before you start assembling. Basically every side of the square except for the top will need cross hatching on it. Alright, so I've got my first side cross hatched in kind of a U shape. Top is just normal. And then I'll use my paintbrush and a little water to put slip on all the sides that I'm connecting. So right now I'm putting the first side on. And since these are leather hard, I'm going to put a little slip on both surfaces just to make sure that it really sticks. Okay, first side, we're going to firmly line it up with the edge and then press down. Nice and firm. The slip will kind of smush out the sides, but just use your finger and you can clean it up. And then for the inside, where the slip has kind of smushed out the side there, you can use your paintbrush and just clean that up. All right. So our first side is on. And then I'm going to continue it to assemble my beveled edges. So this one will go here, this one will go here. But first I'll have to take some time to do all my scratching and slipping. So I'll probably speed up this part of the video. All right, and just like that, your box is assembled. Some tips for cleaning up the edges and stuff: if you use a damp sponge and just kind of smooth the corners and the top edge, that'll make things look nice and cohesive. Also, your paintbrush is a really great smoothing tool. Any weird areas where there's slip coming out, you can use your paintbrush to kind of smooth and fill in those areas, but just make sure that you're really firm in pressing all the sides together, because anywhere that there's a seam, that's a spot where your piece is vulnerable to crack. From here, you can leave it like this and have a nice little box, or you have a few options. If you had a 6th slab, that 6th slab can be the lid of your box. If you want to put a knob or something on the lid of your box, you would just scratch and slip just like you did with the side, wherever you want to put the knob. Add a little bit of slip. And then just take a little piece of clay. You can get wild and creative with your knob, or you can just do a simple round blob. Totally up to you what you want your knob to look like. And then put it on the box. That is a pretty crappy looking knob, but that's okay. You get the idea. That works just fine. If you want your box to be a planter or to have feet on it, then at this point you'll carefully turn your box upside down. And planters typically have drain holes in the bottom. So if you want some drain holes in the bottom of your box, you can just cut out a few holes with your X-Acto knife really carefully. You don't want to put a lot of pressure on the bottom of your box because it could cause the clay to warp. So I'll just kind of twirl my X-Acto knife a tiny bit, and I'll cut out 2 or 3 small holes in the bottom here. This is a great method of construction if you want to make like a bonsai tree box. You can make a shallower, wider piece using this technique. Bonsai trees are super cool. All right, we've got a few holes. And then if we want to put feet on the box, we'll do it the same way. If you watched my last video, we'll do it the same way that we did it with our drape mold. So I'll do some cross hatching where I want the feet to go. And then to flatten it, use a board or a book or any sort of flat surface and just press down lightly. This is acting as kind of like a table for now. All right, and you can clean up the edges of the feet with your paintbrush also if any slip is sliding out the sides. All right, and then the bottom of your box or your planter should look something like that. And if it's not perfect or if it looks a little wonky, then once you put a plant in it, it will likely look just fine. A plant makes anything look nice. All right, that's it for today. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, I know this was a little bit more of an extensive project. If you have any questions, just ask them in the comments and I'll try to respond to you as soon as I can. But otherwise, enjoy your clay making at home. Bye.